Hello everyone, welcome to Trolling with Logic for, what's the date today, I forgot, 17th of February 2013. It is 6 PM in the UK, 1 PM Eastern Time, and tonight we won't be taking calls. This is going to be a live PWNage show where we're going to be taking on the one and only John Pendleton. And welcoming my very illustrious... Yes, and welcoming my very illustrious panelists. Big welcome to John Connor.
Hello, everyone.
And Sarah Connor.
We've got to get you out of it, John.
The T1000, is he here with us?
Have you seen this boy?
And I don't know what the hell that is at the end of the screen. Welcome.
You let
a shy with half her face ripped off. Do you not know?
You let a brony into something Terminator themed, so he's going to be a Terminator pony.
I feel positively nasty in my comparison.
No, that's the Terminator model we use to infiltrate bronies.
Guess what?
Can I point out I'm a proper My Little Pony fan. I was a My Little Pony fan when I was a little girl. I don't think Pony's ever been a little girl.
I was never a My Little Pony fan because I'm a bloke. So...
And?
No, I respect
afraid that you're going to catch the gay off of My Little Pony. Is that what you're saying?
I've already caught the gay.
He's already got the gay.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Don't know. Could it make
I don't know. Maybe it would be gay overload or something.
Yeah.
Gay overload, gay harder.
All right.
It's one of the things he gets accused of.
Yep.
But anyway.
So, shall we... We'll just let everyone know anyone in the room that hasn't been to one of these live PWNages before. Basically, we're going to play an infamous kind of creationist documentary here. And when my panelists spot any errors or mistakes that may crop up, they'll shout stop and then they'll rebut to it. And also, I think this is the first time any of our targets is an actual scientist, because he is an actual chemist, if I remember correctly.
He is. I believe he has a valid degree.
And
what degree? He's not a doctor, though, is he?
No, I think he does have a degree in chemistry, though. And also, he believes that UFOs come from Satan.
Right.
Yes.
Good stuff.
So,
this is going to be so much fun.
So, we're all locked, ready to go. Are you ready, team?
Yep.
Ready?
I'm braced and prepared.
3, 2, 1, and here we go.
Hello, I'm chemist John Pendleton, and this is our conference number 11.
I'm just going to say, I might put my webcam on just for this, because we are going to be talking about the lab coat a lot. And I've got mine on this evening, but I just wanted to... yay. So first of all, this makes us sort of intellectual equals in that respect. We both have the same qualifications to know what we're talking about. But I'll just show you that, in fact, do you know what the difference between his lab coat and a proper lab coat is?
Yours is real?
Well, they're both real. You can just go out and buy them. You don't need a license for them.
Okay, yours was earned.
No, mine wasn't earned. Mine was just bought. I don't know how well this will show up on webcam, but a real lab coat should have stains on it.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't actually get those stains on there. I lent it to somebody, and it came back soiled forever.
If you're careful as a scientist, though, you can keep your lab coat relatively clean.
You can, but if you use it indefinitely, you will get stains on it, even if just a pen runs in your pocket. But his is absolutely pristine and white and beautiful. So something tells me that he's never actually used it in the laboratory. That's my little rant.
We wanted to come on to the whole thing about the authority principle and the fact that he wears that white lab coat to try and con the ignorant into, well, thinking that he's speaking from a position of authority.
Yeah, it's lab coat equals scientist, which is silly because...
It's like Ian Juby's geologist outfit.
Crocodile Dundee.
Just wears khaki and he thinks, oh, I'm a field scientist.
Except he looks like something out of, he looks like a Crocodile Dundee extra. He does. He
looks like a warthog that's nicked some passing tourist clothing.
All right, shall we carry on?
No, yes. I've got something to point out. He says it's a conference. It's just him talking. It's not a conference.
He could be video projecting to a
He's
conference.
conferring
He
knowledge.
used to talking
Yeah,
to
but
himself.
A conference has multi-way communication.
He could have MPD. You don't know.
MPD.
Multiple personalities. Yeah. That's okay. Fair enough.
Two personalities, both of them talk crap.
The second of a series of 3 about dinosaurs.
Stop.
In this one today, we're going to...
I would just like to point out the fact that, whilst I don't necessarily want to knock his qualities as a chemist, but he's a chemist, not a paleontologist. He's therefore
a bit of a problem.
out of subject speciality.
But he read a book about them when he was a kid.
I'm more qualified to talk about dinosaurs.
I watched the Flintstones.
I think that will become apparent.
Anyway, carry on. Let's get to something meaty.
We're going to begin out with the movie Jurassic Park. Now, in the movie Jurassic Park, and by the way, basically just about any movie you see made by Hollywood or wherever, the purpose of their movies is not to follow what is history, what is science, what is the truth. They make a movie to make money, okay?
Really? I had no idea.
Because there was in a movie like Jurassic Park, is that all of it is true. There's some stuff in it that was true. There's also stuff in it that is just makeup in order to make a movie. And of course,
like
with
your talk.
Is he trying to claim that some people think it's a documentary?
Apparently.
But that's not even a straw man. That's just... It's like Nephilim Free saying that atheists who watch X-Men are hypocrites. Nobody who watches Jurassic Park should think that it really happened.
It's based on some
right?
It's based on some scientific principles, but yeah.
And a lot of bad science.
Well, yeah. I'm not saying
it's
it's good
scientific principles, and they fiddle about with them to make the plot line.
Science fiction, basically.
Yeah, it's science fiction. But there are some sound scientific things in there for the core basics of part of it.
Yeah. Well, many.
Yeah.
We'll get on to
with
this,
our
I think.
first transparency here, the idea was to find a mosquito that had sucked dinosaur blood and became trapped in amber. Amber is that sticky tree resin that we believe washed down with the flood and
Stop. Stop.
So the flood bought tree resin, boys and girls. We've learned something new today. So it wasn't a flood of water, it was this horrible treacle-like substance that would have taken eons to travel across the surface of the planet.
Well, if you take sticky things and heat them up, they become quite runny. But no. No, and then some more no.
We don't have to explain this one, do we?
No.
That is bollocks. Enough said.
It became trapped in there. And then it became petrified or fossilized in that clear crystalline...
There is a difference between petrification and fossilization.
That's very true.
Petrification is what happens when you take something modern and recent and you stick it in water that's rich in dissolved calcium carbonate type stuff, and it will become petrified. And
no, that's concretion. That's something different entirely. But no, petrification just means turning into stone, and that can be by a number of processes. I suppose you could say that the amber petrified and that the mosquito was fossilized, but yeah.
No, but I was going to say fossilization is complete replacement through and through of mineralization.
Yeah.
They are different, even if I may have fluffed it.
Amber. Now that was a movie. It is not the truth.
Hey.
What is the truth is this next
this is the only thing we agree on.
They have found Tyrannosaurus rex bones that are not completely fossilized. They're not completely...
Stop.
No, they have. Well, this is one of those things, I suppose. You could say that what they found was not. No, this is a bit confusing because it is all kinds of technicalities. There was some dinosaur bones found which had non-mineralized tissue in it, or rather non-mineralized material in it. and you could.
No, from what I understand, it wasn't that it was unmineralized. It was just mineralized, but there was still the imprint of the soft tissue there. That the soft tissue had been preserved.
Yeah, well, they said that
had
there
been
was basically
it before.
There was basically just gunk inside them. So these, it's rather like what happens if you leave lettuce in the freezer, in the salad compartment of your freezer for 14 years and then come back and open the door. You're not going to find lovely intact cells. You just find sludge. And they found basically the dinosaur bones had fossilized around the outside, and that created a sealed compartment inside. And so there was some unmineralized material, but it was basically just slime from decomposed organic matter. So it's perhaps true to say that it was not fossilized, but then I think what he's going to go on to claim is that that shows that it was recent, and it really was.
The thing is, if it wasn't fossilized, it would have completely decomposed. But they've actually found structures that are fossilized versions of erythrocytes, I think.
Red blood cells, like osteoblasts and things like that, build bone material. What they found were the breakdown compounds of red blood cells. They didn't find any intact red blood cells, and they certainly didn't find any DNA. They tried to get DNA out of it, and it just completely degraded. That's how we... I suspect he might go on to say this in a minute about DNA, but we can't clone anything from it. And it's... completely lost what I was going to say. No, it certainly proves that it wasn't a recent event that these things were fossilized. Mammoths and so on, which supposedly existed before the flood, we do find their DNA, but we've not found a single shred of dinosaur DNA.
Completely turned into stone. There's still parts of it that are like fresh bones. Now, first of all...
Okay, this is basically what I just said, but no, they were not like fresh bones. They were basically what organic material was left had turned to sludge. It was not bone in the sense that you would recognize it as such. It is another one of those
It didn't have any cells, or it wasn't intact in that way.
No.
First of all, if that's the case, how long ago did that dinosaur die? Millions of years ago? Not that long ago. Some hundreds or maybe a couple thousand years ago, but not millions of years ago. And look at this.
Well, this is basically what I was just saying, but again, because it is not very well preserved, the fact that it's there at all is something of a miracle, but that doesn't mean that it died recently, because, as I say, it has not been preserved to the same extent of mammoths and giant sloths and
haven't we managed to extract fairly complete mammoth DNA?
Yes, we have. I mean, they were preserved in ice, which is a very good preservation medium.
I thought that the ice, though, could actually cause the cellular structure, well, cells in particular, to explode if you froze it.
But as long as you're able to, you don't need the cells intact per se to get the DNA. In fact, that would actually help with the extraction of the DNA, because you need the cells to break down so that you can get the DNA. I've done DNA extractions of onion cells and kiwi cells. You need those cell walls to break down.
Yeah.
And so it helps things out. And
it certainly won't particularly affect the DNA. I mean, okay, there are other enzymes inside the cells which will degrade the DNA, but basically it doesn't matter if the cells burst open, because if the contents then freeze, then the contents of that cell are basically static. They're not able to undergo chemical reactions, and so that DNA will actually be preserved very well for a very long time. That's why we, in labs, DNA samples are frozen to preserve them, usually at about -80 degrees, but it's not absolutely essential. So yes, according to the creationist model, all of these organisms existed at the same time before the flood, but it's odd that the only ones from which we can find DNA and from which we can find lifelike tissue are the ones which sort of appeared more recently in geological time. We don't find these in dinosaur bones. So yes, in answer to Pendleton's question, probably they did die millions of years ago, as the fossil record suggests, and not a couple of hundred years ago.
Yeah, and we can welcome the T800 into the show.
T800 101.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I know it's very similar to yours, Zulu, but...
yeah, the audience can't...
Does that mean you teach classes? Interpretation?
No, he means he's studying in the beginner introductory module thing for termination.
Or he's like that airship that crashed. Yeah,
yeah,
with Doctor Who on board, maybe.
Right. Anyway, we shall carry on.
Yeah, sorry.
Under a microscope, they have found little red globules. Every test to present indicates we indeed have found real dinosaur blood.
Stop.
Source,
What
please.
tests?
He hasn't necessarily lied. It almost certainly is derived from blood. It is not blood in the sense that there are no intact blood cells, but it is the breakdown product of blood. So it's perhaps not a lie what he's saying, but it is perhaps misleading.
Talking bollocks.
Yeah, he's saying it's blood. And he's not saying it's like, oh, this is a byproduct of blood. He's saying this is blood. And he's saying the tests reveal that. So it's not, there's no ambiguity here. He's just lying.
Yeah.
Talking shit out of his arse.
Yep.
That is amazing. And that is devastating to the belief that dinosaurs became extinct 65 million years ago.
It's not a belief when you accept the scientific validity of the evidence.
I mean, let's think about this for a second. Like, what would it prove? Let's say for just some freaking moment that this is real blood and the dinosaurs didn't die out any time as long as we thought. What does it matter? What does it matter? I don't understand how that is any sort of like, oh, evolution is not right because dinosaurs didn't die when we thought they did. That doesn't make sense.
I know. I mean, it's kind of. I mean, every so often things have to be revised. I mean, for example, very recently, it was always said that the dinosaurs would never have grazed on grass because the grasses didn't evolve until after they became extinct. We now have found, albeit only a single fossil, which suggests that grasses did in fact evolve just ever so slightly before. And every time something like this happens, it's supposedly, oh, it tears up the rule book, evolution has to be wrong. It just means that occasionally we have to refine some of the details. When it comes to something like the age of the Earth, that's very well established and has absolutely nothing to do with what animals were alive and when.
They died out, if they died out at all, completely. Now, in the biblical record, we have relate the story of creation in 6 days. And as we mentioned earlier, God made...
Well, I'm going to stop there because in that graphic, he had Earth, space, and the universe on day 1 and then light at day 3. And he had a picture of the sun. So, I mean, it's a common thing of people, like one of the plot inconsistencies in the Bible.
Well, I know, but obviously somebody had to go back there and take a photograph for that graphic.
Yeah.
So
take a photo of the sun.
Yeah. Admittedly, the sun is transparent. Sort of. A bit. Yeah, the sun does, well, because the sun is basically a load of gases and ions and things like that, so you would be able to take a photo of it. But yes, it's a very interesting point. I suppose sort of God created the sun, but then didn't set fire to it until day 3. Stand well back for that one.
On the 5th day, all of the sea creatures and the birds. And so that would be a time that God would have made the marine dinosaurs and the pterodactyls, the flying.
There were no marine dinosaurs. I mean, okay, this is a bit of a technicality, but to somebody who understands about the dinosaurs, they should probably know this, that the ones which lived in the ocean are not classified as dinosaurs, they are marine reptiles. And basically all the dinosaurs...
Pterodactyls are not related to birds, right?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
I mean, they weren't dinosaurs either, so...
Actually, technically, he's confusing himself because birds are descended from the theropod family, so T-Rex and Velociraptors. So birds made on the different day to land animals when effectively they're one evolved from the other.
Although, of course, the Bible says that bats are birds, so I don't think he picked this one apart too much.
Also says whales and fish.
Yeah. But yes, the thing about the dinosaurs is that they're all basically descended from a single species called Euparkeria, but everything that comes from them is a dinosaur. They have various characteristics. But yes, the ones that lived in the sea are not technically dinosaurs, which he ought to know.
the flying reptiles or flying dinosaurs. And on day 6, he made the land animals, as well as Adam and Eve, and there would have been land dinosaurs. Now, we saw in the first conference that dinosaurs originally were herbivorous. They were not meat eaters. They were...
What?
I really love it because one of the things is that these people like to say, oh, well, early dinosaurs were herbivorous, and we know that all of them were because that's what the Bible says. And, you can look at their teeth, you can look at everything about them that points otherwise, but, you weren't there to watch them eat other dinosaurs and other living things, so clearly they didn't because we said so. It's the most half-assed argument.
Plants either.
I mean, there is a sort of weird question whereby if they were all strictly vegetarian, and okay, most of them don't have the right dentition, or at least quite a lot of them don't have the right dentition for it, but if they were completely herbivorous, they did play some rather rough games with each other, wherein they will leave bite marks in each other, they will swallow the bones of each other, they will get bones stuck between their teeth from other species and indeed from members of the same species. So we're quite not really sure what they were up to, especially if there was no pain in the Garden of Eden, there was no suffering. So
see, those are just love bites. That's all those are.
they seriously had some loving issues then. It's a bit like in the episode of Supernatural where Famine goes to a town and he gets people, to really chase after the thing that they're really, really hungry for, whatever it is, not literal hunger. And the episode starts with a couple that are really kind of, it's like one of their early dates kind of thing, and they're that into each other that they do actually start chewing each other.
They were vegetarians, if you please. And so there was no danger of them eating Adam and Eve. Now, this is the cover from a rather liberal magazine, and on the cover, the man is saying to the woman, "What? He told you that dinosaurs existed on the Earth at the same time as man?" Yeah, he called it creationism. It's the latest in scientific findings. Now, this magazine was not at all in favor of that fact, and so they had to kind of poo-poo the whole situation. Now, we want to go to Texas, south of Dallas-Fort Worth, southwest, to a town about 80 miles from there called Glen Rose. Next to Glen Rose is a state park called Dinosaur Valley. In that park, they have found over 2,500 dinosaur footprints in Cretaceous stone.
Oh, here we go.
Now, let's take a little step back. Why did they put the name Jurassic Park as the name of that movie? I would have put the name Dinosaur Park.
He's quite right, actually, because I suppose Jurassic Park just scans better and has a better ring to it. Yeah. If he's really going to deconstruct this, then he is pulling at strings, because it's a lot of people criticised it at the time and have criticised it since, that a number of the species in Jurassic Park are of Cretaceous origin, Tyrannosaurus rex being the most famous one.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is with Jurassic Park is we've got to remember it's a film. It's made for entertainment purposes. They'll go for a name with a nice ring to it. They just want to show dinosaurs because, let's face it, most people don't know that, the ins and outs of where dinosaurs come from in the geological column. They don't really know what the geological column is to a greater or lesser extent. And they go to see a film like that to be entertained with something that, even if the science that they portray in the film isn't technically possible, something that seems to have a relatively genuine ring to the science involved in the film, so they've got internal consistency. They don't go there to gain factual information about what happened.
Yeah. So I just hope that he's not going to start attacking it on that basis, because we all know this now.
By the way,
there were all kinds of dinosaurs.
Real quick, we are featured right now. Our viewers are going up like holy crap. I just want to say that if you are viewing this on the front page of BlogTV, you can come down to BlogTV/people/trollingwithlogic, and you can watch us pwn a man who wears a lab coat and believes he knows science because of it. His name's John Pendleton, and he is a creationist, and we're having fun making fun of him.
And bear in mind that there may be strong language in here, so if you have very delicate ears, you have been warned.
Yeah, tough shit.
Little bastard.
Fuck it, let's go fuck some stuff.
What does Jurassic Park have to do with it? Well, if you remember when we saw the geological time scale, there's actually 3 periods that they say pertain most to dinosaurs: Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Those are the names for the levels of the rock. Well, in this area of central Texas by Glen Rose, there's a lot of Cretaceous stone, and in the Cretaceous stone they have found these dinosaur footprints. Now, on that area there also goes the Paluxy River, which in summertime, July and August, when there's very little rain, the river tends to dry up. And that's when they first began to cite, in the bottom of the river, dinosaur footprints in the stone. There was a big flood in the early 1900s that just rushed through that area and just lifted off a whole overlay of stone, revealing underneath that, preserved excellently, these dinosaur footprints. And so that which has caused investigation and studies in that area, and revealing also the Dinosaur Valley Park. Here's one also from the the Paluxy Riverbed. You can see the different dinosaur footprints here in the stone.
I'm bored.
Notice here on the left side the overlay of stone that had to be lifted off. Once they found some prints, they began going over and lifting up the succeeding overlays and found these dinosaur prints. Notice also in the front of the photograph the ripples there that are preserved in stone. I believe they're the beginnings of Noah's flood.
Oh,
stop! Stop. A flood would not really produce ripples, even if it's the beginnings of a flood.
I know. I mean, most of the...
You'd have a steady sea level rise, or river level rise.
Yeah, it depends what model you're looking at. I mean, certainly we do find fossilized raindrop imprints, which are quite sweet. And sometimes that's used as evidence. A lot of the current new creationist models of the flood show tremendous walls of water shooting out of cracks in the earth, which would most certainly not leave little dainty ripples, which I looked at the photograph on the...
No, it would just paint everything flat. When you're looking at extremes...
Wouldn't actually even do that. It would, from what I remember from physics, it would actually remelt the earth.
Well...
yeah, well, I mean, if you're just looking at the effects of the water flow, extreme high, the two extremes of water flow, really high or really low, would leave something flat. But if you're generally going high enough with water flow, you'll start gouging stuff out. You're going to have an erosional environment, not a depositional one. And yes, if some of the crazy shit that happens with hydroplate theory, you wouldn't have like flooded water. You'd have some issue with steam and shit.
Yeah. It's also this fact that I realise that you have to say that it's the early period of Noah's flood because the dinosaurs are running about on the surface of it. But if you actually look at the geological progression of the area in which the Dinosaur National Park is, it's basically at the top of an enormous sedimentary sequence. So if anything, these are the later rocks in the Great Flood. But of course, by that point, surely everything should have been wiped out. There shouldn't still be dinosaurs running around while all this stuff is being deposited. So it doesn't really make any sense from that perspective either. We can also, I don't know anything about these ripples. I haven't been able to analyse them, but you can also tell whether they are symmetrical in their cross-section or asymmetrical. If they are symmetrical, it means that they were formed by tidal motion washing backwards and forwards. If it's asymmetrical, then it means that the water is flowing in one direction continuously. And I suspect this is a tidal mud flat. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's most likely the case. Even as I said, they're still far too small. This is basically a small braided river or a delta or something.
Which would fit with having footprints.
Yeah, it can't be deep water.
Yeah, because you need a muddy environment like that to create the environment where you have the imprint being taken by the foot and then having it covered by new stuff.
Yeah.
And on the subject of the name of Jurassic Park, don't know how many people know this. Steven Spielberg actually wanted to try and put the copyright thing on the term Jurassic, but then he was told that actually it's in part of the geological column. Now you can't do that, so he made it Jurassic Park, that he put his special copyright thing on. That
I can kind of understand. I meant to say as well, I wish I could remember the name of this place. There is fantastic site on the coast of Portugal, which I'm lucky enough to have been to. But there are a number of very, very steeply tilted mudstone and limestone beds there, which have got a lot of sauropod tracks in them. I have got a photo somewhere of me sitting in one of these. But the thing about those as well is that because the beds are tilted, you can see a progression of them, and there are dinosaur footprints visible in more than one. So these can't have all have been laid down at the same time at the beginning of Noah's flood. And these are hundreds of meters thick, so it doesn't really fit that there were still dinosaurs wandering around at the bottom of the flood while all this stuff was being laid down.
Because yeah, but just herp it up. Don't forget that this is a chemist trying to deconstruct something that geologists have put together. So he's not really going to be in the best ways of doing it from any kind of authority or whatever.
Okay, I'll stop now.
There was a movement of water that made ripples in the mud, and then a ton of mud fell on top, sealing in those ripples and footprints. If you go to Dinosaur Valley State Park, as you're going along that small county road, you'll go right in front of the Creation Evidences Museum. Stop in there. It is fantastic. Now, they're closed on Sundays and Mondays, so plan your trip accordingly. I've been there on 3 occasions, and every time I'm impressed, and I learned new things.
Oh, good for you.
Stop. None of them was scientifically correct. He was bullshitting out of his arts, each and every one.
It's just a little plug.
I've taken in the museum. This is one dinosaur footprint, and this is number 11 shoe of my youngest son, not by any means the shortest of my boys. And you can see here next to his shoe one of the toes of the footprint. To the left-hand side is another of the toes of the footprint, and in the middle is the third toe. Measures almost a yard across that footprint. Huge foot that dinosaur had. Now, though they've discovered a number of dinosaur footprints on private property, they found dinosaur footprints also. And they have located human footprints.
Stop. I've watched this, and if they've watched people trying to look at how the human footprints go, and basically you would have had to have been either walking with your legs crossed or been two people walking side by side that had both lost a leg, but the opposite leg.
Hopping.
So they're both hopping, using each other for support. And it's just mind-numbing that they don't get the fact that if you've got something exposed at the surface, and it's in a mudstone is not a very hard rock even, you can go and sort of start rubbing bits of it off if it's a very poorly consolidated one, put a bit of water on, mix it around, and any ideas what you're going to get? Mudstone and water gives you mud.
Yep.
So, these things aren't going to last very long if they're exposed.
Yeah, I mean, that one that you showed in the graphic on the screen, we'll see it again in a minute, is a reasonably convincing human footprint. I know a lot of the ones that Ian Julie has cited, and we may see some of these later in this video, they are particularly weird-looking human footprints. The toes are weirdly splayed out, and if you actually try and fit your own foot in them, you'll quickly realise that you can't.
Or that perhaps maybe the human footprints back then were deformed, so that really kind of pisses on their thing of
they haven't presented these footprints since either, have they? As I remember reading, they haven't presented them since or been able to show where they got them in situ.
Yeah, I mean, some people have come forward and admitted to faking them. Okay, you can't necessarily know that they're telling the truth either, but it's certainly, as I say, it's certainly not very difficult to fake footprints on mudstone, as one was saying, or limestone. You can etch it with acid and so on. My favourite one that I think it's Ian Julie sites is a footprint in granite, which is the biggest rock which forms deep underground.
When it's liquid, it's about 600 degrees centigrade. I'm not going to see anyone putting their foot in that.
It would be the last footprint you ever made, I think.
It wouldn't even be a footprint. It would be a little depression that wouldn't even be foot shaped, because it would just start doing its stuff. And once you're taking your foot away from it, even if it does start to cool down, you're it's going to be still able to flow and fill in that dimple.
Yes. So it's that's an interesting one. But let's have a look at some of these footprints then and see how convincing they look.
You see, now just a minute. That's what I said. Fantastic, interesting, new information. On private property, they found over 400 dinosaur footprints and 80 human footprints. Here's one of the footprints. You can see where the large toe is, the form of the foot of the other toes, and then a ruler alongside to give an idea for scale. Here's another human footprint. You can see the large toe, 1, 2, 3, 4 small toes. They carefully cut out.
That does not look like a foot.
That's a bit of a weird looking foot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a pointy foot. Like, what's wrong with that foot?
And it's like, if you looked at the one he showed before, there's this kind of weird curve bit in the side, which is actually how real footprints look, because you don't make contact over the whole surface of the foot. That one's very flat looking, triangular looking. It doesn't look like a bean-shaped ball of foot. It's a very strange looking one. And there are nice gaps between the toes as well. If you go out and leave proper footprints, you probably won't find there are very many gaps between the smaller toes.
And is it not documented that these footprints were creationists going and vandalizing dinosaur prints?
Well, as I say,
I don't know.
It's quite difficult to prove that something like that is a hoax, because even if you get somebody owning up to it, the opposition could claim that that's a stooge claiming to have gone out and made them. But yeah, there are certainly plenty of people who owned up to it.
Yeah.
Difficult one.
Cut out the whole rock and then cut it diagonally with a sharp saw and found the corresponding lamination indicating it is a true human footprint. Now let's do a little experiment.
So,
everybody raise your right hand.
We actually got it. He doesn't show any evidence of this. He doesn't show any evidence of the cross-section of the footprint. We can't actually, and of course he doesn't cite any sources, otherwise we would be able to check and see whether or not somebody had done this analysis and proven that it was an actual footprint, a compressor, not just something that was carved. So it's all very well and good, but how do we know that he's telling the truth?
Well, I mean, it's already been shown in the past that footprints have been forged by creationists to make it look like there are human footprints on the same rock layers as dinosaur footprints. I remember watching a debate between, I forget the creationist name, but it was Creationist versus Kenneth Miller.
Zombies. Oh.
And the guy he brought up, he's like, well, what about these footprints up in it wasn't the river that Pendleton was talking about. It was somewhere in Michigan, I think. And Kenneth pretty much went over the whole thing. He's like, these have been proven to be more than likely fake footprints, and that's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah. For a minute, though, I just imagined a computer game called Creationist versus Scientists, which is a Plants versus Zombies spin-off, whereby you have a museum and you have to plonk different types of creationists in front of them who will stop scientists getting into the museum by stopping them and arguing with them and showing them bogus evidence. I'm going to go and create this now. Screw the rest of the show.
Now, with your thumb, touch your fingers one by one to the other fingers. Okay, do that again. Okay, good. Now put your hand down.
The opposable
now,
thumb
with your right foot, touch your big toe to all your other little toes. Anybody do that? Would you please leave the room? You belong to another species. You see, what this is a human footprint. Humans have
what if
two
you'd
hands
had your big
and
toe
2 feet. The
monkeys
are
knocked off.
Monkeys or apes have 4 hands. What we call feet are actually like a hand. This is definitely a human footprint. Here's another footprint in stone where somebody put their foot.
Stop for a second.
I don't quite
Look,
understand.
they've shown you how they did it.
So he's saying dinosaurs didn't have opposable thumbs. So I don't quite understand why we were made to touch the fingers of our hand. I know that dinosaur toes are quite splayed out, rather like fingers and toes aren't, but that doesn't prove an awful lot. There are plenty of dinosaur species which were basically, they didn't have the head feet that were more like hooves. They didn't have distinct toes and so on. So what?
Well, I think the logic is something like dinosaurs couldn't do it, humans couldn't do it. Here's a footprint that definitely couldn't do it, therefore a human left it.
Its thing is though, it's ignoring the thing of the pendactyl limb, which I'm sure my son John has heard about.
I have heard about it, Mum.
Yes. For those that don't know, the pendactyl limb is basically the fact that every mammal has the same limb, and it's exactly the same between your legs and your arms. You have your big thick bone at the top of the start of the limb leaving your body. You then have you then have your hinge joint, which does potentially have a little cap bone on it. Now, on the human, the cap bone, it's fused onto one of the lower limb bones, hasn't it? The big one of the two.
You mean in the arm or in the knee?
Yeah, well, in the knee you still have the kneecap separate, but in the elbow, that bit is fused to one of the two major bones either side. Because on the upper part of the limb, you've got the one bone, then you've got your kneecap bit, then you have two bones, a major and a minor bone, connected together to form the lower part of the limb. So your lower arm.
I got it wrong. Sorry. The big one at the top is humerus. Then there's the radius and the ulna.
Yeah, it depends if you're looking at. Yeah, it depends if you're looking at the arm and leg.
Yeah, well, yeah, they have different names in the arm and the leg, but they're big.
But you basically got this one major bone. You've then got a hinge joint with like a cap bone on it. If it's not fused to one of the other bones, then you've got two bones, a major one and a minor one, and then you've got this big section of bony plates that provide the slide and glide joints that you have in your wrist and ankle, and then you've got the tarsals, and the metatarsals, or the phalanges and the metaphalanges, which form basically the bones in your fingers. So in your hand, if you look at where your knuckle is, you've got a bone that goes from your knuckle to your wrist for each of your fingers, even your thumb, and then you've got the different segments. So they're the tarsals and the metatarsals, or they make up the phalanges, and I can't remember what they are in the hand.
I can possibly remember all the names. But
the key thing is this thing's called the pendactyl limb, and it's the same in your arm as it is in your leg. It's the same in human as it is in a dog, as it is in a whale, as it is in a horse. All the things that's happened over time as the different species have evolved is different because they've responded to evolution, and they've evolved and changed position and sort of like size and shape in proportion to what they're used for. So for chimpanzees and orangutans, their feet still have the hand type shape that we have in our hands because they use them to, for very dexterous things. Yet in humans, because we weren't learned to walk upright, we needed the stability of having a foot that shaped the way it is. And so our feet, as it were, or as they now are, lost that ability to have that dexterous manipulation because we don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
Fit exactly to the form of the footprint in stone. Now, it's very impressive that in one area there's a whole bunch of dinosaur footprints in Cretaceous stone. In another area there's some human footprints in Cretaceous stone. That's impressive enough in itself. But more impressive are these footprints. Here we have Cretaceous stone, and in the front we see a dinosaur footprint, and just 18 inches away is a human footprint in Cretaceous stone. What does that mean? Men and dinosaurs.
I tell you what, it's funny. There's loads and loads of examples of trace fossils, as they're known. A trace fossil is, as opposed to a body fossil is where you actually find the remains of a particular creature, whatever it might be. It's usually the skeleton.
What you're finding fossilized is traces of its existence.
Yes, and the trace fossil is typically footprints or a burrow that the animal has dug or something like that. But it's always the case that they show loads of footprints, which are a type of trace fossil. You never generally seem to find body fossils, i.e. human skeletons and dinosaur skeletons found together. And whereas a trace fossil or footprint is quite easy to fake by carving it out of the rock. It's much more difficult to fake a convincing human skeleton. So it just seems a bit odd because presumably, if they're claiming fossilization is as common as it is, we should be finding plenty more examples of this.
Dinosaurs lived together at the same time, just like the Bible indicates.
Stop.
A couple more, okay.
Yeah, stop.
Okay.
That was actually kind of funny.
Yeah, because like
show's
fossil
over, guys.
mammal in the Precambrian. Yeah, right.
Stop. Okay.
Yeah, show's over now. We just made John Pendleton agree to stop. We're done. Thank you for joining us.
Hang on. Does the Bible actually say that dinosaurs ever lived alongside humans? Because
No.
I don't think the word dinosaur is in the Bible.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the creationist sees them.
The Bible never dinosaurs ever.
Yeah, the dinosaur doesn't appear in the Bible, and they agree this. But of course, the word dinosaur was a 19th century invention.
Yeah, but they don't even give descriptions of them.
No, but there are references to dragons, and a lot of creationists will claim that the biblical dragon is in fact a dinosaur. They also claim things like the behemoth and the leviathan are also dinosaurs.
Yeah, a lot of people like to cite the behemoth and say that's a brontosaurus. There's a lot of problems with that, mainly because
Stupid.
it was actually it's sort of like a Taurus-like animal. It's like a bull, essentially, what they call what the behemoth was. If you go by the description, if you go by the location in which this particular passage was probably written, these kinds of bull-like creatures existed, and as such, that was likely what they were talking about, especially since the description that they gave was very similar to that. It was a lot smaller, actually, than the brontosaurus would have been. Then they also talked about like swinging testicles and shit, something you don't tend not to see on a brontosaurus.
It's a really strange one, actually. A lot of the modern translations of the Bible, the English translations of the Bible, will say the sinews of his thighs are tightly knit, and the original, the Latin King James version says the sinews of his testicles are closely knit. I'm not sure what exactly that means. Whether he was very pent up all the time. I don't think it's anything about swinging testicles. I think that's your dirty addition to it.
Swing low, swing chariot.
But also, there's not necessarily any reason to presume that the Leviathan was ever even meant to be a description of a real thing. It's basically God is showing his might to, is it Job or he's basically trying to scare the shit out of him. Because he's such a nice guy, and he's showing him these terrifying creatures that he's created, but they could have just been completely made up creatures just to try and scare the children.
Could just mean acid trips.
We don't know.
The man on the right here in the blue shirt is pointing to a dinosaur footprint. Actually, it's a trail that goes from top to bottom on the page. The man on the left in the yellow-orange shirt is pointing to a human footprint, a path that goes from left to right on the page. It's only 7.5 inches away from the dinosaur footprint.
Stop. For me, that picture is not showing enough detail. I would want to see proper field sketches of that and things like that, proper schematic things.
They haven't provided these. I did some research before we came in, and they've been asked for them, and they haven't provided them.
Gee, I wonder why.
That would seem to have been copied from a book, and we don't know, unfortunately, which book it is, so we can't look that up. But yeah, these aren't properly taken archaeological or paleontological photographs, and as one said, there should also be sketches taken, and should all be filed and processed like proper scientific evidence. And as far as I can tell, they haven't been.
Footprint indicates men and dinosaurs lived together.
No, it doesn't.
Another
You can
series
say
of
it again if you want to.
left,
It's not going to
right,
make it true.
left, right of human footprints came up to this overlay of stone. Now, since this site is relatively close to Dallas-Fort Worth, they notified the television, newspapers, some universities to come on down and watch while they lift up that overlay of stone to see if the human footprints would continue. So they brought in a big tractor and carefully lifted up that overlay of stone.
Carefully with a
high-pressure water hose, cleaned that whole area. There were a total of 14 human footprints with an average stride of a yard. Now, the amazing thing is, not that it was in Cretaceous stone exactly, that person was stepping on top of dinosaur footprints. Here we have a sketch of the dinosaur print with the human print on top. The left-hand picture, we see the heel section.
That foot has 4 toes. This proves that the Simpsons were in that area. Again, it's a pretty weird shape, but it's not even a proper sketch. It's certainly not a sketch by a very good artist.
No, it's bollocks. Besides, if one of those footprints had gone on top of the other, unless one had only partially obscured the other footprint, then you would have destroyed the previous footprint.
Yeah, basically. It's also, I mean, it's very easy to, I don't know, they didn't show us any evidence where they lifted up this stone carefully with a tractor and found these extra 14 footprints. We weren't allowed to see those. It's very easy to pick out a footprint shape just in the random patterns in a stone. You should see my dad when he's fossil hunting. He finds all kinds of weird and wonderful things that just aren't there. But yes, you know, if they were genuinely under unmoved stone, and if they were convincing human footprints, then I think I would probably be convinced by them. But unfortunately, we're not allowed to see those.
And they say that science has a conspiracy.
Goes up to the right. Then, starting from the heel position again, going up to the left, we see the human footprint on top of the dinosaur footprint. Men and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Thoroughly different than what they've always told us, but thoroughly in agreement with what the Bible says. Here we have, to close out this part about the footprints, is we see here in Cretaceous stone a path of dinosaur footprints crossing the path of human footprints. Men and dinosaurs lived together.
So this is getting repetitive.
Also found in that area was this human handprint in Cretaceous stone.
That's a freaky looking hand.
What?
What the hell is that hand?
This proves that Kermit the Frog was in that area.
That wasn't that was.
That looks nothing like a hand.
Like, I noticed that the guy's not putting his own hand in the fossil to show what a good match it is, because it really won't fit. The fingers are horribly splayed apart.
And they're too short.
Why has this person left such a weird handprint?
Because it wasn't a person.
Well, yes, that is the normal truth. If you're going to make a forgery, make it a convincing one.
I mean, the fingers are like actually like a little wavy even. Like they're fucking, they're not even fingers, they're like little tentacles actually.
I mean, I can potentially be sympathetic to that because of the way the stone will weather and so on. But it's not in the right shape for a human handprint, and it's not got the, because obviously the palm of your hand isn't completely flat. You need rather a bumpy handprint. It's unconvincing in the extreme.
Geologists have verified this is Cretaceous stone. And the thing is, it's obvious this is a human handprint in Cretaceous stone.
It's obvious that it's not.
Have the geologists or paleontologists verified that those footprints are genuine?
Well,
no,
I know. I mean,
he's just put the verification of the age of the stuff in there.
I don't quite know. I mean, I suppose you wouldn't necessarily want to say. It's not something that most people would care about. But it doesn't say how it was verified. I don't know whether or not the location of the stone was verified and it was known that it was of Cretaceous age. But certainly once you've taken a rock out of the field, it's very, very difficult to prove where it came from, and it's virtually impossible to date a rock, or certainly a sedimentary rock, just on a hand specimen, because you've absolutely no idea where it comes from. There are certain rock types which you generally only find associated with certain periods and certain places. As a whole, one rock looks very much like another when it's not in situ.
Stone. Now, what I think happened was it was beginning to rain for the first time in history at the start of the flood. This person got scared, was running for higher ground, somehow tripped, was falling, put their hand out to break their fall, but since it had rained some, the ground was kind of soft, left that print in the mud and took off.
I mean, that's a wonderful story that you have no evidence for, dude.
But it's all pull from his arse.
I mean,
And it's stinky the shit that's been up there.
I'm looking at that hand and it just seems worse and worse every time I look at it. Like the palm actually looks like twice as big as a regular human palm.
It is rather
Well, there were giants back then,
Really?
Yeah, the fingers are like tiny compared to the palm.
Oh yes, giants, the offspring of angels and men.
The Nephilim.
It is rather like one of these.
If only we knew someone that was free of Nephilim influence.
It's rather like one of these. It's a bit like one of these TV crime dramas where they find a fingerprint or something, and they say, "We're looking for a white Caucasian male between the ages of 20 and 23. He likes Wagner and files his tax returns on time." And how do you know all this shit?
Like
He's able to do full psychological profiling because of a print in the mud. We don't even know if it is a handprint or not.
Than just somebody sitting down and going, "Oh, I can make a handprint." That's what I would think. Nobody, when they actually fall over, they don't splay their fingers that wide, do they? I don't.
I mean, it's not even that they're splayed that wide. It's that they're like wavy, like they're freaking tentacles instead of actual fingers. The palm print looks too big. The fingers are too small.
No. To be honest, as well, if you look at the part of the print, the fingers, the things that are on there, are actually spread too far apart to be fingers. Unless someone's got some sort of deformity where the fingers are actually more spread apart than they are. Because if you look, your fingers all spread from like the same area roughly on your hand, whereas on that print there's a bigger gap between those points of origin for the fingers.
Quick question: our ancestors would have had larger hands with fingers wider apart, wouldn't they? A long time ago.
For what reason?
Just because I don't know. I'm thinking about you're looking now. When you look at primates that are that we have now, chimpanzees, their hands are actually quite large and the fingers are actually quite spread apart compared to
chimpanzee hands are very similar to ours. There's only like 1 or 2% difference in the genetic information of a chimp and a human.
They do have weird hands. I'm looking at them now. I'm not quite sure. What to say? They certainly don't have such big palms as the photograph that handprint shows.
No, they've got longer fingers, don't they?
They look quite short and stubby to me. Well, it depends. It's funny. Anyway, we could talk about this for a long time. I think it's fairly safe to assume.
Yeah, I'm looking at some pictures of chimpanzees as well, and again, they're pretty much of a muchness with ours. Even their feet are pretty much of a muchness with our hands.
They do have very long, thin finger bones, don't they? Don't know. I think it's fairly safe to conclude.
If you look what I mean, though, in terms of the position of where their fingers are, they're all like our hands coming out from the same place. Yes, their fingers are longer.
I know, but what does that actual handprint look like? It's funny. Anyway, I think we can fairly safely conclude that handprint in the photograph is not a real handprint. Certainly not a human one.
Well,
Again, I've just googled handprints and they're not that different.
But then some mud came in, sealed that over, and preserved it. Also found in that area is this hammer. Now, when the hammer was found, it's inside of Cretaceous stone. All they could see was just a little bit of wood.
This is the London artifact, and we like the London artifact. Pothole has covered this in plenty of depth. What I like is the fact, what's his name, Brock, I can't remember his surname, Brock Lee, I can't remember, another creationist who claimed that the hammer was obviously pre-flood because part of the handle started to turn into coal, by which he meant there was a very, very small amount of blackening on part of it, and unfortunately we don't have the original, it's disappeared. So we can't say whether or not it was coalification or whether it was just a burn. Yes, apart from that, this rock, the fossil and the hammer itself is most definitely unfossilized, and the rock that it's found in, unfortunately, again because we've lost it, we can't look at it an awful lot. It doesn't seem to show any particular bedding from what the artifact seems to show, and it's generally accepted that it was almost certainly from Cretan. because it was found, well, as Potter says, it was found underneath a waterfall, and so that seems like quite a likely candidate of a place where a concretion can form around objects. So it's another old creationist favourite that gets dredged up every now and again. And unfortunately, because we've lost it, we can't say any more on the subject, but didn't seem like a very convincing find.
But so what's basically the problem? Are you saying it is a hammer, but the rock isn't as old as
no,
they say it is, or what?
That's precisely the point. It is a real hammer. I can't remember whether or not it was given any particular date. It was, I think, something like a century old or something. But yes, it's basically the material that forms the rock around it is derived from a fairly old rock. It was found in an area where the surface geology is Cretaceous in age, but the rock is dissolved into water, and then that water has been allowed to stand still or evaporate or something, and it precipitates minerals around the hammer. There are plenty of finds like this, and there are plenty of places in the world where people deliberately create these kinds of artifacts just for their own amusement.
And also, I would imagine some of them doing it to fuck with creationists. I would. Totally.
You can make money off it, as Potter said.
Yeah.
But sticking out of the bottom. As they hit the rock above, it fell off and revealed the hammer inside. Now, if you can notice, there's a little bitty mark on it. The hammer, they scraped it with a file, and indicating that it was steel. They sent this hammer in this state to the laboratory that tested the rocks they brought back from the moon. The laboratory said this was a special...
I'll just say, I don't know whether or not they are going to show us the complete chemical breakdown of this iron hammer, but it's a really, really weird metallurgical composition, if that is the word. They find all kinds of weird traces in it, like chlorine and fluorine and so on. It's basically like unlike any alloy that you would ever find made by man. I'm not quite sure how on earth they managed to get it. Maybe it's from outer space.
Well, actually, if you consider what happened on Friday, it's quite possible for people to get bits of metal that aren't of this world because meteoric iron.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about an alloy that was made by aliens.
Oh, right.
Because there's some elements in there that just don't form alloys. But let's see what.
Then why would the aliens put them into metals?
Well, I don't know. They have they're way ahead of us, Womble. You can't question their motives.
Do they have they found ways of people having substantial porn collections on their hard drive, whilst having it look innocently like a clean hard drive in case their parents see it?
That's my excuse anyway.
What's that? That just made no sense.
Steel.
Non sequitur.
It was iron that had bonded with sulfur and chlorine. It's a stainless steel, and they said this kind of steel can only be...
It's not stainless. Look at the fucking picture of it. It's not stainless steel. It's one of the most stained bits of steel I've ever seen. It's not even steel, it's iron.
And
it's iron with some other stuff added into it.
Yeah.
Actually,
stainless steel
stick iron in water, it will react quite quickly unless you do something to protect it, like galvanize it or paint it.
Yeah, I mean, stainless steel has chromium and I think palladium possibly, and certainly chromium is the major constituent. They're metals which undergo what's called passivation, whereby they form a thin layer of oxide on the surface, which is very stable and doesn't flake off, and so it stops the rest of the metal corroding. But sulfur isn't going to do that. Sulfur's not even a metal, and chlorine is exactly the same. It's a halogen, in fact. So it's not going to be a stainless steel. I don't know whether or not he's not going to show us the complete chemical breakdown, but unless he found chromium in there, and it has to be quite a lot of chromium, it's not going to be stainless steel.
Or uranium. Let's make it radioactive.
It's obviously not stainless, just from the photograph.
Or a banana, half an eaten banana.
It's 10.5 to 11% chromium needs to be present.
That's very true. Yeah, I'm looking it up as well.
Oh, I love Google.
It can only be made today if it's in an atmosphere more than double atmospheric pressure. Isn't that amazing? And, by the way, dinosaurs do not make hammers. Another interesting artifact is this
Wow,
fossilized
really?
finger.
Who says they did?
Mr. Pendleton, that does look like a finger, but really, you don't believe that, do you?
Stop.
It sort of looks like a finger in the
It's a
sense
fossilized sausage.
Where are the knuckles?
Yeah, there are no knuckles. There are no wrinkles in the skin. It's quite wide in the middle. They claim that they X-rayed it and that it looked like it had bones down the middle, but I'm not in the slightest.
How can you X-ray a rock?
Well,
I have to
you
agree with Moonrise on this one. He pulled it out of his arse in that condition.
I mean, if it's a fossil, it vaguely looks like it resembles a belemnite.
Yeah, I don't think it is a fossil. Well, I think it is probably a flint nodule, because flint nodules come in a weird and wonderful variety.
Oh yeah, they can be all sorts of crazy shitty shapes.
And a lot of them look like things. I've got flint nodules which look like twigs and worms and things like that, and most of them aren't. You get quite a lot of long, thin ones. Some people think they might be worm burrows, which are natural collecting points for silica. So you get them. I mean, that one looks like a finger, because it's basically got what looks like a fingernail on the end of it. As for the X-rays, you can X-ray a rock. You have to use a lot of X-rays. That doesn't matter, because the rock isn't going to get cancer. But they said
it would depend on the size of the rock and things like that, and what the rock actually is. But
yeah, but basically, if you shine enough X-rays at just about anything, then some of them will get through. They said that there were bones down the middle. It's just basically a dark patch down the middle of the X-ray, which is generally agreed to be due to the fact that the rock is thickest in the middle, and so fewest X-rays will get through that bit. They certainly don't look anything like the bone shapes that people know and love from finger X-rays. And they cut through it as well, and I don't think they found anything inside it. Of course, Mr. Pendleton, I don't think, is going to admit that. I've just found, actually, this is amazing. I've just found another picture of a fossilized finger from Mars, taken by the Curiosity rover. So that's,
put the link in the chat. That's going to be worth a few lulls.
It will.
Doesn't that prove the Martian bukkake theory?
Oh, that's Nephilim. Hang on a second. Would it reach that far? According to Nephilim 3, it reached the moon at least.
I thought the bukkake theory was just the moon, not Mars.
The cosmic.
Well, you know, if it reaches escape velocity, it's just a matter of which direction it goes in.
True.
Yeah, according to it, it went in all directions.
Oh God, this image actually comes from UFOblogger.com. They're trying to say that it is a genuine. I don't know. I don't know this website very well.
It doesn't look like a finger to me. It looks like a kind of more male appendage.
His wife's top drawer.
We found the face of Mars. We've now found the cock of Mars.
God, check that out. Whoever had that was just a lucky person.
I'm going to bit.ly that for people.
There's no scale, unfortunately, so we don't know how happy
it may or may
Mrs.
not be a
Mars was.
microscope and tweezer's job. We don't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that total is just not a rock with shadows falling on it in a weird way.
Yeah. I think the long and the short of this fossil finger business is bullshit.
Yeah.
Definitely liberal shit.
It does look like a fat ass finger, though.
Well, it does have the shape of a finger in a place that looks like it used to have the nail. But let's be good scientists. Let's do more testing of it, not just looking at something. And they've done just that. They did 2 more excellent tests. One was they cut off a small end of the finger or finger-like object and found exactly what they hoped to find. Fossilized skin, fossilized flesh, the tendons, the bone, even the marrow was fossilized.
They never provided this for study to any credible scientific source. I'd like to point that out.
I love the fact that
they put it to Creationist journal, so you got accepted and printed.
I love the fact they said they cut off a little bit of the end. They actually cut a massive diagonal right across the middle. I know that doesn't really affect anything. But I'll put another link into the Skype chat. I'm sorry that the viewers can't see this. But that is the same graphic that Mr. Pendleton was showing on the screen. And
I will bit.ly it for our masses.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't know about, I can't see where you can see skin and tendons and so on, but the bone in particular is weirdly off center. I'm not quite sure what kind of a finger this was. And the bone is also quite narrow. There's a lot of flesh on it.
It doesn't look like a finger at all, sort of seeing it in the better thing. Hang on, I shall bitly.
Can't really see any recognizable structures inside the finger itself. It's just, I don't know. Just why are there tendons? I suppose there are tendons in the finger. I'll be quiet. I don't know why I sort of
it seems to me that they're pretty much just kind of accepting that any sort of phallic rock is probably a finger.
Maybe that's what they're hoping about the penis. It's actually a finger.
You know the basic 2 rules of Freudian psychology. If it's taller than it is wide, it's a phallus. If it's wider than it is tall, it's a phallus turned on its side.
So basically, whichever way you look at it, it's a phallus.
Yes.
I'd be embarrassed.
Density within the finger indicating where the bone used to be. By the way, this person was a giant. They had fingers that were 6 inches long. Amazing. Men and dinosaurs lived together.
Well, if they were 6 inches long, they wouldn't have been
when
human.
we go into caves sometimes where people used to live, we find different drawings on the caves or canyon wall.
So they were really honest when they showed the rock next to a finger and showed it in proper scale and everything, right?
What? Are you suggesting that the 2 aren't? I think they probably, if it is larger than a real finger, then they'll claim it's a giant. But
yeah, but they showed it right next to a finger, and now he's admitting that they didn't show it to scale even.
Oh right, okay. How nice of them. I don't know how big is this thing then. I don't know. Because in the pictures that I've just been looking at, I've just looked at the phallic one on Mars again.
You're not having phallic dreams of Mars, are you?
There's nothing to suggest. No, another planet. So I never go into a planet. There's nothing to suggest in that image that the 2 aren't side by side. But yeah, as you say, there's no scale bar. If it were a real finger, then that's also a valid substitute for a scale bar, sort of. But yeah, there's no real excuse. It's the thing, you see, it's like what we said about the footprints. They just don't document things in the same way that scientists do.
No.
With all scientific images, you have to include a scale bar. Well, when it's relevant, obviously. Because otherwise you can't necessarily know what it is you're looking at or how big things are and how you need to appreciate them and on which scales. Just frustrating.
Walls. What kind of drawing could a archaeologist find that would scare him? Well, if he saw drawings of dinosaurs and pterodactyls, it would scare him to death. Why? Because it goes against his belief system.
So,
not for us
what?
to believe.
I suspect now we're going to go to the same old creationist arguments, various animal depictions from temples and things around the world which show dinosaurs. I should say that first of all that all of these temples and cave paintings and so on have to have been created post-flood. And I don't know, I suppose it does fit with the creationist model that some of the dinosaurs have survived since the flood, and some people say that either they then went extinct or they became smaller because they couldn't handle the new low oxygen atmosphere. But no, first of all, a lot of the drawings are fairly ambiguous. Secondly, even if they do show dinosaurs, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are contemporaneous. In other words, that they were alive when these carvings and paintings were made. There is an interesting book called The First Fossil Hunters. I can find out the name of the author if anyone's interested. Which is all sparked from an illustration on a Greek vase, an ancient Greek vase, which appears to show a skull eroding out of a cliff, and the scale of the size of the skull has led many people to think that the ancient Greeks actually discovered dinosaur remains and that they formed the basis for a lot of the giant serpent myths and so on that the Greeks were so fond of, like the Hydra that Achilles had to fight, and no, Hercules had to fight, sorry. So it doesn't necessarily, even if we find evidence of these from the ancient civilizations, it doesn't necessarily mean that they had to be alive at the time. They could easily have found the remains of them and interpreted them as having some kind of significance or some kind of mythical origin.
Also, I can show you plenty of drawings of mythical creatures that have clearly never existed. I mean, just look in any book full of, you know, fantasy art imagery.
Yeah.
The fact you can find a picture of something that someone drew doesn't mean that it actually existed. And then what they do is they look and find something that they can interpret as whatever was drawn.
Yeah, I've just put a link, if anybody's interested, I've just put a link in chat to that book that I just mentioned. It's called, The First Fossil Hunters, Paleontology in Greek and Roman Times by Adrian Mayer.
Believe many dinosaurs lived together. We have this cave in Europe, the Bernafal Cave, in which you can see by the diagram below, up on the rock, a mammoth is butting heads with a dinosaur. They drew what they'd seen. Interesting thing about this cave, it's closed.
How do you know they saw it?
Earlier.
Is that a dinosaur?
Because they don't want us to know that men and dinosaurs live together, because it goes against what they've been teaching us and continually saying that men and dinosaurs didn't live together.
You know,
now
here's
in
one of the
Utah,
weird things about Pendleton. He has strange. He has this habit of kind of just making up stories based off of nothing. He just makes up these huge, elaborate stories that he has no evidence of. He just says, so here's what they saw, here's what happened, I can tell you what happened thousands of years ago based simply on a handprint or something like that. And he can do an entire psychological evaluation about the people who lived thousands of years ago, who have no writings of. He knows everything that happened in the entirety of history. And all he has to do is just come up with some story. That's all he has to do, and he knows, and he doesn't have to show any fucking evidence of it. Is the weirdest thing about it.
I've just put a link. I've put it in Skype, and I've also put it in BlogTV. That is a link to the image of that supposed cave painting that he just showed. I can't even see any pigment on that rock. I think it's just a natural erosional surface on the rock, and he's managed to pick out a mammoth shape and a dinosaur shape from that.
I can see the kind of two head shapes, but
my point is, I don't think it's painted. I don't think it is in any way man-made.
No, I was going to say, but I think mine is based on the impression of what he's just said.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have seen it without that interpretation. But
I'm kind of seeing that the so-called mammoth thing is looking more like some sort of alien, with some. I'm not even gonna say what my brain is also picking out of what the mammoth trunk is, because you're just gonna accuse me of being obsessed with certain things.
Cock of Earth. Yeah, no, it's just. Oh, I just think it's a bit disingenuous to call that a cave painting when it doesn't look like there's any paint on it. I'm sure he's got more where that came from, though. There are plenty out there.
In the Natural Bridges National Monument Park, there's a number of interesting things to see there of natural bridges, but in one of the canyons, there is this drawing on the canyon wall. You can see here the head, long neck, 4 legs, and long tail. Looks just like a dinosaur. Now some people say, no, that was just some hippie that was smoking marijuana. He went down there and drew that. Now that's a possibility. Here's an interesting thing in desert areas.
What? So he's willing to concede that it's a possibility that some hippie smoking marijuana went down and drew it, but no. Like, where did that even come from? I don't. What?
First of all, what is a bit weird is that he's reversed that image. I'm not quite sure why. But I've got that original image as well if people would like me to link to it. There's a sort of a humanoid form next to this dinosaur type form, which looks a little bit like Barney actually. It's got a little smiley face, which I quite like, which I don't think...
I don't even know what that was.
It's slightly more clear on this image. I know that the video quality makes it a bit difficult to see. I can kind of see why it looks like a dinosaur. I'm not quite sure as it necessarily is. It's a very weird looking one. Very weird looking humanoid in the top. But yeah, I don't know whether or not this is... I don't know anything about this, so I don't know whether or not it has been proven to be ancient or whether it was a hippie smoking marijuana who did it. But it could be a number of things. It just felt like a sickle for one thing.
When the rock is exposed for long centuries of time to sun and heat,
as opposed
cold,
to short
rain,
centuries.
snows, the rocks that are exposed begin to form what's called desert varnish. It's a glossy formation that builds up over the rock. And this particular dinosaur drawing has a very thick deposit of this desert varnish, indicating that it was made some hundreds of years ago. In the Grand Canyon, there are many drawings that the Native Americans had made years and years ago. Buffalo and deer and warriors, corn, snakes, things like that. And in one of the places, there's this particular drawing that looks very much like an Edmontosaurus, a type of dinosaur. In another canyon wall, there is this drawing of some winged creature. Now notice his wings are not like that of an eagle, but they're more like this one of a pterodactyl. That flying dinosaur or flying reptiles. It has like a membrane.
Okay, I think we need to stop and just
drew
try to
what
work
they
out.
had seen.
He's getting through these rather quickly now, isn't he? I really don't know. It's difficult to say because, again, he doesn't tell us where these are from, where we can find out about them. There are no sources, so I can't really see very clearly in the video, and nor can I find the equivalents on Google Google Images. So it's difficult to comment. And how he knows it looks like an Edmontosaurus, I'm not even sure. Why he's picked that specific species of duck-billed dinosaur. And I can't quite see the pterodactyl either, so I can't really classify it as anything more than fanciful. It'd be nice if he gave sources as well.
In 1890, in in Arizona, a couple cowboys were out on the range and saw a large winged creature take off on the horizon. They rode over there and shot it and killed it, cut off the tips of its wings. And it was reported in the Tombstone newspaper. Probably the last living Quetzalcoatlus at that time.
So not Nature Journal then.
Yeah.
And like instead of actually bringing the body in, they just got the tips of the wings for some reason.
It's just my mind is numbed by the bullshittery of that claim.
Yeah, I mean, why would you keep the wingtips?
If I saw something freaking unnatural and huge like that, I'd be like, what the fuck? I do what the guy
his head.
You do what the guy did in Evolution, and let's take it to some actual science people.
Yeah, you could make quite a lot of money off it.
Yeah, even if you can't, you're not a scientist, there would still be potentially some credit for being the person that found it.
Like, oh, I found some weird creature that I've never seen before. Better cut off the wingtips. What do they do? Put the rest on the barbecue and eat it? Dinosaur drumstick, anyone?
What do you want, light meat or dark?
I should say, for any gullible people watching it, that illustration that they showed was a drawing. Video?
Now in the south of the Soviet Union, they found a high plain where they found over 3,000 dinosaur footprints.
Dinosaurs on
they
the
never had
plane.
any problem. The problem began to rise and they began to find also human footprints mixed in with the dinosaur footprints.
Oh, we're not back to this again.
Now, what can we expect from these people? Are they going to change their way of thinking? Of course not. What are they good at? Making up fascinating stories.
So, I just asked Mr. Pendleton, would you change your method of thinking if somebody presented evidence contrary to your worldview?
Somehow I doubt it.
It's one of those questions, of course. Does he genuinely believe this, or is he making money off it? I suspect he genuinely believes it. But yeah, well, you know, as we keep saying, a good scientist should change their mind if the evidence is watertight and if it is compelling. Unfortunately, the trouble with this is that scientists are seldom allowed to actually look at the evidence, and they're seldom allowed to analyse it properly. So we're not going to change our minds unless we're actually allowed to see the evidence, we're allowed to write it up and publish it properly.
And so in 1995, in the newspaper Pravda in Moscow, came this reporter's comments on the human and dinosaur footprints together. He wrote, "Because we know that humans appeared much later than dinosaurs, it was an extraterrestrial that walked in his swimming suit on the ancient seashore." Isn't that fantastic? Rather than face the fact that humans and dinosaurs live together, they have to make up some incredible story.
Like yours is no different.
No, in fact, our story isn't incredible. Our story has evidence. His has a Bronze Age book that was written 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, who claimed it was an extraterrestrial?
Apparently it was a reporter for Pravda.
Oh, right, okay. That well-respected
the whole ancient
journal.
astronaut thing.
Yeah. Basically, a newspaper that was basically a propaganda piece for the Communist Party.
Right, okay. So rather than finding a source that's actually worth listening to, it is basically straw manning. There's no other word for it.
Now, one of the things that I want to encourage you in all of this is that that verse that's been a blessing to me, Proverbs 11:30. The fruit of righteousness is a tree of life, and he that wins souls is wise. When I started giving these creation talks,
Relevant?
1994, many different times on television in 97, I honestly often felt kind of like an apostate.
Shameless self-promotion.
Or people say I was doing things in the flesh, not in the spirit. You know, I'm talking about dinosaurs and
the
fossils
flesh.
and carbon-14 and science. And
don't put that image in my head.
Honestly, it felt very uncomfortable.
That's another conference.
In 1998, I was invited to Cuernavaca, Mexico, an hour south of Mexico City.
There's Nephilim free there.
And I spoke in a church where 200 people paid $1 to hear me speak. The pastor came to me and says, "John, would you be willing to preach on Sunday?" I said, "Oh, sure, I can preach about anything. What do you want?" He said, "Oh, this, your strong area."
Stop.
I said, "This?"
Yeah, stop.
I think that says it all, doesn't it? He is willing
How
to preach
dare
on
you, Womble, put those images into our head? What do you think you were doing?
I was trolling you.
Stop quiet.
But no, I think that says it all. He's willing to preach on anything, whether or not it is something about which he knows the first thing. He is willing to speak about anything that you ask him to, and I think
especially if it's flesh related.
Yes, as I say, I think that's one of Pendleton's X-rated seminars. But puts the demon into seminar.
I actually think you might have killed Marty. Seriously,
yeah. Something like that.
Incapacitated, certainly.
Well, you know, it is my job to destroy all the Terminators.
I think it is also, the only thing that Pendleton asks, I may be confusing him with another creationist, but I think all he asks for these sermons is that you just pay for his travel and accommodation. So he's more than happy to just come along and spew bullshit on whatever you ask him to talk about, whether or not you know.
Well, that's all creationism really is at the end of the day when you boil it down to it. It's all about these big mega churches who want to make money, and they make money by keeping people ignorant and feeding them the information that they think they need and that they think is correct.
Yeah, and a lot of
talking to them about the dangers of the flesh.
Stop it! You will pay, Womble.
Make me.
I will hunt down the picture of Bionic Dance at the Gay Pride Festival, and I will.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, you know, I'm not put off by that stuff. I will deliberately say Nephilim free on STV and giggle as Colin puts a picture up, and everyone else is going, no! I know, I'm just...
I think it would be worse if it were
he said,
his
yeah, Juan,
head on a naked man.
Go for it, John. Do it. Well, I really didn't feel right about it, but the Lord said to me, he says, John, if the pastor said it's okay, it's okay.
So he didn't feel right about the fleshy
believe
things,
it or not,
because the
I gave
pastor said
two
okay,
Sunday morning
did it
services.
anyway.
Same
It felt
preaching,
so right, but
because
it
people
felt
didn't
so
fit in one
wrong.
service. The church is so big.
He likes it
Twice
big
on
fleshy.
dinosaurs. And even God liked the message. You say, well, John,
God
how do you
like
know
the
that?
fleshiness. No
Because
way.
10 people gave their lives to Jesus Christ.
They gave their
That
lives
was
to
a
Jesus
turning
for
point in my
fleshiness.
ministry in 1998.
A ministry
God
for
spoke to me and
flesh?
says, you know, John, it doesn't make any difference. If we use dinosaurs to get people's attention,
They'll still like
answer
the
their
flesh.
questions,
No,
to help them
That's
see
enough.
that science is in agreement with the Bible, that the Bible had it right
No, it's
first.
not.
We can make a transition that goes into the
So that
gospel of
everyone
my
can
son,
enjoy the
Jesus Christ.
flesh.
Right,
If they get
okay,
saved-
Zulu, any more mention and you are kicking Womble, all right? I'm not going to put up with this.
Let's do it.
Ruining the recording.
I was in La Ceiba, Honduras. It's on the Gulf Coast in 2001. I was speaking in different schools. And
Flesh?
Is the rest
last
of
school I
this
spoke
video
in-
just a sermon?
after the
I think
prayer,
so.
That seems like
I
it.
said, now
Yeah,
how
it
many of
usually
you
is.
seriously,
We found out with all
honestly, ask
all
Jesus to come into
creationist
your
videos
heart
end with a little
as
bit
your
of
Lord and
preaching.
Savior? Please raise your hand. 100 hands went up, and
Bullshit.
one of the teachers. I was later in
It's
Ecuador,
bullshit unless they were already
and speaking
believers.
this time in Christian schools. The second day there,
Or
I spoke
deserved?
in
They
this one
gave you
Christian
flesh?
school, and a lady came up to me with
flesh?
tears in her eyes. She says,
Right.
John, you have
Zulu,
no
what did I
idea
say?
what this
You missed
dinosaur
several.
conference meant to me.
I've
A
been
week
trying
ago,
to remove you as an
myself,
operator on
my
chat, but I
husband,
can't.
our children had a terrible family fight over dinosaurs in the Bible. She says, today you answered all of the questions
Of
that
the
I could not
flesh.
answer a week ago. And so the stories begin to multiply
Of the flesh.
over and over. This message is so important because
wanted more
as we
flesh.
have in our verse there in 1 Peter
Stories
3:15,
of
but
the flesh.
sanctify the Lord God in your hearts and be ready
flesh.
always to give an answer to every man that asks you a
flesh.
reason of the hope that is in you with
Of
meekness. and
Hang on a
with
second.
fear.
Can we pause it there for
So
a second?
we have answers.
You know, for a geologist, you're awfully obsessed by fleshy organic things. Shouldn't you be chasing a rock?
I'm saying this as much now because I know it's bothering sound.
I'll get my own back. You
And-
just wait.
And to be fair, it's boring. I'm just making it entertaining for people.
It is a bit.
Ugh.
I tell you what. Play the video, and I'll improve things slightly.
You can add more fleshiness.
We have answers that we can give and that God is
About
using
flesh.
to bless in many people's lives. Well, where are dinosaurs mentioned in history with a different name? They're called dragons. We
Of
have,
the
for
flesh.
example, the George of
Oh, it's
England
the dragon argument. I love
that
this.
in the year
Can
300
we
killed a
pause
dragon.
for a second?
And in England, we have found fossils of the baryonyx, a type of
Stop.
dinosaur.
Oh, no. Stop,
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah, John, England, that's in Scotland, right?
I believe so, yes.
Well, hang on. Oh, I missed this. Sorry, I was trying to play Right Said Fred over my mic and ended up pulling out my Ethernet cable.
Yeah,
What?
you nailed.
And I should say that pulling out my Ethernet cable is not a euphemism for anything.
Yeah, it is. You know,
it's well known that myths and mythology exaggerate real facts.
What was his argument about England versus Scotland?
The George and the Dragon thing.
Pendleton said something about how Loch Ness is in Scotland, England.
Yeah, I think
Scotland, England. Oh,
yeah.
Well,
so I was just trying to be funny by asking him if England is in Scotland instead.
No.
It's kind of.
I will reach down the internet.
It's kind of confusing because it used to be what is now called Great Britain or the United Kingdom. It used to be referred to as England. This is a number of centuries ago. So it's kind of, I think that John Pendleton really should know better. But a lot of Americans get very confused over what is England and what is Scotland and what is the UK and what is Britain.
You've got Wales, England, Scotland are separate countries. Northern Ireland and England are technically the same country, but the United Kingdom is all of those countries combined into one, but they're all technically separate countries.
Yeah, and Great Britain does not include Northern Ireland. It's basically the larger of the two of the British Isles, which is coming out in different altogether. And as I say, Britain used to be called England. This is, I think, back in the...
And then you've got the Isle of...
No, England is England.
We don't want to do with them.
What was that? What was that, Womble?
Amongst the Aborigines of Australia, they have a number of legends and songs that are thousands of years old, in which they describe very clearly large animals in the lakes of Australia that would tip over boats and canoes, eat the people. If there were livestock watering there, they would be eaten. And the description is basically identical with the plesiosaurus, that long-necked marine dinosaur. Without even anybody telling them. They'd already known about them. They're in Australia. Coming a little closer to home here in Mexico, in the state of Guanajuato, to the south, there's a town called Acámbaro. And there they have found some 33,000 ceramic figurines, most of them made before the time of Christ. Many that look very much like dinosaurs. They had designed and drawn, made what they had seen. Many dinosaurs.
I'd like to pause there. You know, I think that these would have been mentioned somewhere in the Bible, in one of the books, somewhere. You know, they're walking down the road and they encounter a brontosaurus with a splinter in its paw. And Jesus did wander up to the brontosaurus unafraid and pull out that splinter. And then sent it to Scotland to live in a lock.
Aren't those figurines the same fake figurines that were like bought by some people from some con artists somewhere? I can't remember the specifics, but
there are a lot of fake ones, and there are other ones which haven't been proven to be fakes, and it gets very confusing after a point. First of all, can I just apologise? Did you just get a blasted cat food advert from me a few minutes ago? Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, as I said before, of course there are no dinosaurs explicitly mentioned because the word dinosaur hadn't been invented when the Bible was written, and the name...
Well, also don't forget there was the Nicene Treaty. They decided which books of the Bible were kept in the Bible, so dinosaurs may well have been mentioned in one of the other ones, but they just burnt them.
Certainly in the Apocrypha...
Well, dragons were certainly mentioned a lot more in one of them. I mean,
there are a lot of dragons in the Apocrypha.
Did Jesus ride a dragon to smite some Romans?
No, he didn't ride a dragon, but he did when he was like a baby, befriended dragons.
Womble, what kind of... Jesus never smote any Romans. What kind of a Bible have you been reading?
I've never read the Bible.
You've been reading Bible fanfic?
No. No, the only fanfic I read is, decries preps.
I mean, there's really... To be honest, even in the apocryphal writings, you won't find Jesus like smiting a fuck ton of Romans. He did smite people. He did do some smiting.
I am, of course,
the peaceful man that he was.
You got, you wield machine guns and get away from her, you bitch.
In the apocryphal writings, there's a lot of weird shit. You got Jesus befriending a den of dragons when he was like 1 or 2. You got him just smiting some kid who ran into him. And he's like, "Do you even know who I am? You are dead now." And then just killed him.
I'm going to be really, really honest here. I really, 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 really wish dragons were real, because that would be awesome. Even if they had been real and weren't anymore, that would still have been awesome.
Even if they were terrifying and ate people, you'd still think that would be cool.
I'd have loved it. I'd have loved it.
I might get really excited when a massive earthquake or massive volcanic eruption happens, or a massive rock falls from space. And yes, those people get injured, but...
You only think that dragons are cool because you don't have them. If you'd grown up with dragons, you would either be ambivalent about them, or you would probably dislike them.
No, I'd have one for a pet, and I would call it Bob.
You'd have one.
Bob would guard my house. It might not fit in the house, but
you wouldn't care because everybody else would have pet dragons. It wouldn't be special. The point is, you want the only dragon. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Shall we get back to the video?
Ahoy.
What, sorry?
Shall we get back to the video?
No, I don't care anymore.
He's just going to do some more preaching, right?
No, I think he was... He was onto dragons now, so...
He's
go on.
I put Right Said Fred back on again.
In Peru, South America, we have the place called Ica. It's in South Lima, close to Nazca, where the famous Nazca lines are. We'll talk about that more further on in the conferences about ancient or primitive man, conferences 19 and 20. But here we have a number of the Ica stones that are well cut into the stone and polished. And this one you can see dinosaurs in the 2 of them. The one here on the right, you can see the legs, the plates on the back, very much as we see in the Stegosaurus, the head, the eye, and a native Peruvian riding on a dinosaur. They drew what they had seen. Men and dinosaurs had lived with others. In fact, in these Ica stones, we have drawings of all of the dinosaurs that we know of today. In a number of different stones, they all appear.
Shouldn't that ring alarm bells? If there are depictions of all the dinosaurs that we know of today, because surely not every single species, I mean, they're probably not all for starters, because that's quite a lot. There are, I think, thousands maybe.
I was going to say, weren't the dinosaurs dominant for over 100 million years?
Well, yes, but also I suspect that not every single species would have lived in South America where these stones were carved.
No, that's also true. What would have proved them accurate, though, is if it had depicted a dinosaur that we later found.
Well, yes, that would be a good point. Although, of course, the depictions are fairly ambiguous for starters, so it would be...
Well, yeah, a bit like religion.
Yeah, none of them with feathers, I don't think, on the Ica stones. I don't think there are any with feathers, which we now know to be the case. There are a lot of them, like Velociraptor, we know actually had feathers now.
Yeah.
It does make that kitchen scene in Jurassic Park a bit less scary if the Velociraptors have all got little tufts of gay-looking feathers on their heads.
I know, it causes me to reevaluate the whole of Jurassic Park. Actually, T-Rex's arms, the reason why they're so stumpy and little is because they would have been used for feathers, for like mating displays, to make them look, oh, look how pretty I am, to get the girls. Because if they'd actually tried, 2 male T-Rexes tried ripping each other apart, they would have killed each other. Or one of them.
T-Rex didn't have feathers, as far as we know. And,
I thought I read something somewhere about T-Rex's arms probably having feathers, for like a mating display like birds do, as opposed to the fighting type mating displays that other animals do, because they would have ripped each other apart.
I personally prefer the playing piano hypothesis.
I like the theory that they came out with a recent hypothesis that T-Rex wasn't actually a predator or a super predator; it was just a scavenger.
Oh, well, that does the
yeah, I've heard that.
And it's periodically rubbish. It's a bit difficult to say because we find a lot of tooth marks from T-Rex and other species, and it's difficult to say whether or not they were alive or dead when it happened. But there seem to be some bite marks from T-Rex which have started to heal over, which would suggest that the prey was still, it survived the attack and was able to recover somewhat. So really, I don't see why it matters quite so much. I suppose because people like to imagine it being a vicious carnival.
Fight to the death! I also want a pet T-Rex.
Yeah, good luck with that
Can I have my own X-Wing and my own YT-1300?
Yeah, screw you. I'll have the Death Star that America wanted.
Anyway, the thing about the dinosaurs is that most of the well-known species of dinosaur, like T-Rex and Stegosaurus and Brontosaurus and so on, have become famous because they were the early ones which was discovered by European paleontologists in the 19th century. And it's only in more recent years that we've started to discover different species from other continents. And so, for example, the largest sauropod that I've discovered was Argentinosaurus, which you won't be surprised to discover was discovered in Argentina. So we might expect to see that on the ecostones if they're from South America. We might not expect to find Stegosaurus or T-Rex because, as far as I know, they weren't necessarily native to South America.
You mentioned the A word.
The A word?
Yeah, Argentina.
Oh, get over yourself. I was like, Argentinosaurus? When was that written?
Again.
We won't get into discussion about the fault.
You can see in this one, let's see, there's like a Brachiosaurus. Here it looks like a fish. Here's like a Tyrannosaurus rex, a pterodactyl, a Stegosaurus, Triceratops. They drew what they had seen.
So,
also in their articles of...
Why has Triceratops got 2 horns? the clue is somewhat in the name. I know that not everybody here has had a classical education, but I think most people know what the prefix tri indicates. And
can you buy those stones anywhere, by the way? Because they look really nice.
Yeah, because the guy who makes them still does.
Does he?
It's like those crystal skulls, which were made with a thing like a Black & Decker. It was rather embarrassing for all people.
Yeah, those stones were made using dentist's tools or something like that.
Yeah, they just seem too good to be true, don't they?
Yeah. The guy who made them has admitted that he made them, and he still does. And sells them to tourists, so it's
doesn't he
it's
like
a known forgery? So
bury them in poo?
I
don't know.
Give them the patina that makes them look old.
Yeah, I think so.
Why would you use poo to do that?
I think possibly the acid will etch the surface, or I'm not quite sure. It seems to work. Painting yogurt is another one. You paint yogurt on things and let it go mouldy, and then it looks like it's come from the bottom of the sea.
Pottery and
cloth.
That's
actually true.
We have drawings too that look like dinosaurs. Men and dinosaurs have lived together.
Wow, dinosaur.
Now, let me just make a comment here as we're about to close, that there are basically 2 reasons why people believe in evolution. I believe it's just basically 2. One is because of ignorance, and for that reason we are making these conferences to get rid of people's ignorance. Another reason is basically it's to calm their conscience, either from social pressure or basically the idea is this: there is no God, there are no commandments, there is no hell. I'm God, I can do whatever.
That has nothing to do with evolution.
People will believe in evolution because it's convenient. It's convenient because of their immoral lifestyle, or just to maintain their social standing, to keep their job, and not to rock the boat.
I want to go on a rant here.
Okay.
I want to just go on a little...
Let's rip him a new one.
So, the 2 reasons that he gave
for
people believe in evolution. The first one is ignorance, which I think if anybody understands anything about science, they would understand that ignorance is the reason why people believe in creationism. Ignorance is the reason why people believe things that are completely erroneous in accordance to the entirety of the scientific community, such as the world is 6,000 years old or 10,000 years old or whatever. It's completely and utterly off the actual age that science has been able to determine, around 4.5 billion. So there's that. That's stupid. Ignorance, my ass. And the other one really pisses me off. Oh, the other reason why they believe in evolution is, so they can ease their conscience, so they can believe that they're God, so that they can be okay with their immoral lifestyle. Who the fuck are you to say what is not an immoral lifestyle, you arrogant asshole? Oh, I have a book that tells me that the creator of the universe says that this is immoral. You know what? If that creator of the universe is literally interpreted through your book, then I'm sorry, but your creator is also an immoral douche. The guy who says, hey, let's kill an entire tribe of people because they don't believe in the right God. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, that tribe was sacrificing children. Fantastic. Well, why don't you just stop that instead of committing genocide on their entire people?
Well,
as well. You would think that an omniscient God would be able to come up with a better fucking reason, or a better way to stop something that he sees as immoral besides, well, let's just kill everybody. Something that he does time and time again in the Bible and orders time and time again. This is not a moral lifestyle that this God is ordering us to live. So if you're going to say that we, as people who accept the theory of evolution, are simply living in an immoral lifestyle, and that's the reason that we believe it, that we accept it, well, then you have a lot of explaining to do as far as what you believe to be moral. Further, I would like to say that there are, of course, plenty of Christians that totally accept evolution, and so that doesn't really explain neither of those reasons, explain any of that. When you look at all the Christians who accept evolution and who are still Christians, how does conscience play in on that through this worldview? It doesn't at all. How does ignorance play into this worldview, especially when a lot of these Christians are freaking scientists who accept it and defend it on a scientific basis? This makes absolutely no sense. Neither of the reasons make any sense. And to be honest, if I had a choice, and I knew that this evolution, that this fucking Christian God existed, that this guy believes in the literalist interpretation of the Bible, I would rather not worship this God. I would rather look at him and say, no, you are a horrible thing and I refuse to worship you. But even if you do exist, even if I had absolute proof that he existed, there is no possible way I would worship that God. There's no way. I would be a misotheist. I would be walking around saying God is an asshole every freaking day. So if you're going to tell me that I'm the one who's immoral and that that's why I'm going to believe in or accept evolution, then you are on a level of arrogance that is beyond that of anybody that you think is trying to say, well, I'm God. Bullshit. You're the one who says that God is speaking to you. You're the one who thinks that you know the mind of the creator of the universe, who is omniscient in every way. You can't possibly know that. Yes, you're going to say that we're the ones who think that we're God? Screw you, John.
Hey, well done.
Do you feel better now?
And let's also look at the fact that morals are entirely subjective as well, and history's proven that time and time again. The Mayans, for example, thought it was perfectly fine to sacrifice 1,000 people a day to their gods.
Well, Bodhi, I'm just going to go ahead and... No, I'm not going to get into a huge argument here, but the notion that morals are entirely subjective is not something that I totally agree with.
Okay, and we'll get to the end of the video now.
Now, I want you to stay in tune with us. We still have many, many great, really interesting things to share. There's still stuff. Hey, did dinosaurs go on the ark? Where are they in the Bible? Are they alive today? Remember that balloon. Keep an open mind. We'll see you soon. God bless you. Thanks for being with us.
Look who's talking.
Oh, nice hypocritical note to end on there.
So that's it over.
Thank fuck.
Thank the flying spaghetti monster.
Perfect timing too.
Yes. Well, I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, panel, for taking part in that.
Our pleasure.
No problem.
And
it was fun.
I wouldn't say it was our pleasure, but it was...
Yeah, it was your pleasure at our expense.
Yeah. Just to let everyone know, we're back this time next week, and we have Sanal Edamaraku on the show. He is the president of the International Rationalist Association, originally from India. He can't go back to his home country as he's been charged with blasphemy in India for debunking the miracle of a weeping statue of the Virgin Mary.
Oh Lord.
And actually,
which was actually sewage.
Yes, and people were drinking the water. People were drinking the tea, so he's actually doing them a favour.
Yum.
Yes. So.
Oh yeah, can you just the peanutty taste to it?
Yeah.
1 number 2 of two in your tea.
Yeah.
She's squeezing sweet corn out of her eye.
Anyway, that's.
Why does that look like she's dribbling carrot out of her left eye?
Wait a second, this isn't tears, it's vomit.
Anyway, that'll be us next week. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will see you next week. Good night, everyone, and thanks for joining in.
Good night.
Right.
No.
And also, he believes that UFOs come from Satan.
Right.
Yes.
Good start.
So,
this is going to be so much fun.
So, we're all locked, ready to go. Are you ready, team?
Yep.
Ready?
I'm braced and prepared.
3, 2, 1, and here we go.
Hello, I'm chemist John Pendleton. And this is our conference number 11.
I'm just going to say, I might put my webcam on just for this, because we are going to be talking about the lab coat a lot. And I've got mine on this evening, but I just wanted to... So first of all, this makes us sort of intellectual equals in that respect. We both have the same qualifications to know what we're talking about. But I'll just show you that, in fact, do you know what the difference between his lab coat and a proper lab coat is?
Yours is real?
Well, they're both real. You can just go out and buy them. You don't need a license for them.
Okay, yours was earned.
No, mine wasn't earned. Mine was just bought. I don't know how well this will show up on webcam, but a real lab coat should have stains on it.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't actually get those stains on there. I lent it to somebody, and it came back soiled forever.
If you're careful as a scientist, though, you can keep your lab coat relatively clean.
You can, but if you use it indefinitely, you will get stains on it, even if just a pen runs in your pocket. But his is absolutely pristine and white and beautiful. So something tells me that he's never actually used it in the laboratory. That's my little rant.
We wanted to come on to the whole thing about the authority principle and the fact that he wears that white lab coat to try and con the ignorant into thinking that he's speaking from a position of authority.
Yeah, it's lab coat equals scientist, which is silly because
it's like Ian Juby's geologist outfit.
Crocodile Dundee.
Just wears khaki and he thinks, oh, I'm a field scientist.
Except he looks like something out of he looks like a Crocodile Dundee extra. He does. He
looks like a warthog that's nicked some passing tourist clothing.
All right, shall we carry on?
No, yes. I've got something to point out. He says it's a conference. It's just him talking. It's not a conference.
He could be video projecting to
a
conference.
He must be used to talking to himself.
A conference has multi-way communication.
Hello everyone, welcome to Trolling with Logic for, what's the date today, I forgot, 17th of February 2013. It is 6 PM in the UK, 1 PM Eastern Time, and tonight we won't be taking calls. This is going to be a live PWNage show where we're going to be taking on the one and only John Pendleton. And welcoming my very illustrious... Yes, and welcoming my very illustrious panelists. Big welcome to John Connor.
Hello, everyone.
And Sarah Connor.
We've got to get you out of it, John.
The T1000, is he here with us?
Have you seen this boy?
And I don't know what the hell that is at the end of the screen. Welcome.
You let a
shy with half her face ripped off. Do you not know?
You let a brony into something Terminator themed, so he's going to be a Terminator pony.
I feel positively nasty in my comparison.
No, that's the Terminator model we use to infiltrate bronies.
Yeah.
Guess
Can
what?
I point out I'm a
It's
proper My Little Pony fan. I was a My Little Pony fan when I was a little girl. I don't think Pony's ever been a little girl.
I was never a My Little Pony fan because I'm a bloke.
And?
No, I respect
afraid
ponies.
that you're going to catch the gay off of My Little Pony. Is that what you're saying?
I've already caught the
He's
gay.
already got the gay.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Don't know.
Oh, well, that just
Could it make
I don't
him?
know. Maybe it would be gay overload or something.
Yeah.
Gay overload, gay harder.
All right.
It's one of the things he gets accused of.
Yep.
But anyway.
So, shall we? We'll just let everyone know anyone in the room that hasn't been to one of these live ponages before. Basically, we're going to play an infamous kind of creationist documentary here, and when my panelists spot any errors or mistakes that may crop up, they'll shout stop, and then they'll rebut to it. And also, I think this is the first time any of our targets is an actual scientist, because he is an actual chemist, if I remember correctly.
He is. I believe he has a valid degree.
And
What degree? He's not a doctor though, is he?
no, I think he does have a degree in chemistry, though.
Could have MPD. You don't know.
MPD.
Multiple personalities. Yeah. That's okay. Fair enough.
Two personalities, both of them talk crap.
The second of a series of 3 about dinosaurs.
Stop.
In this one today, we're going to...
I would just like to point out the fact that, whilst I don't necessarily want to knock his qualities as a chemist, but he's a chemist, not a paleontologist. He's
that
therefore
is a bit of a problem.
out of subject speciality.
But he read a book about
Which
them when he was a
isn't
kid.
I'm more qualified to talk about dinosaurs.
I
I'm a
watched the
physiologist.
I think that will become apparent.
Anyway, carry on. Let's get to something meaty.
We're going to begin out with the movie Jurassic Park. Now, in the movie Jurassic Park, and by the way, basically just about any movie you see made by Hollywood or wherever, the purpose of their movies is not to follow what is history, what is science, what is the truth. They make a movie to make money, okay?
Really? I had no idea.
Because there was in a movie like Jurassic Park, is that all of it is true. There's some stuff in it that was true. There's also stuff in it that is just makeup in order to make a movie.
Oh,
and of course,
like
with
your talk.
Is he trying to claim that some people think it's a documentary?
Apparently.
But that's not even a straw man. That's just... It's like Nephilim Free saying that atheists who watch X-Men are hypocrites. Nobody who watches Jurassic Park should think that it really happened.
It's
Oh,
based on
children,
some
right?
It's based on some scientific principles, but yeah.
And a lot of bad science.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
it's
it's good
scientific principles, and they
yeah.
fiddle about with them to make the plot line.
Science
can't
fiction,
get-
basically.
The
Yeah,
whole
it's
cloning.
science fiction. But there are some sound scientific things in there for the core basics of part of it.
Yeah. Well, many.
Yeah.
We'll get on to
with
this,
our
I think.
first transparency here, the idea was to find a mosquito that had sucked dinosaur blood and became trapped in amber. Amber is that sticky tree resin that we believe washed down with the flood and
Stop. Stop.
So the flood bought tree resin, boys and girls. We've learned
Yeah.
something new today.
Sterilized material, but it was basically just slime from decomposed organic matter. So it's perhaps true to say that it was not fossilized, but then I think what he's going to go on to claim is that that shows that it was recent, and it really was.
The thing is, if it wasn't fossilized, it would have completely decomposed. But they've actually found structures that are fossilized versions of oocytes or erythrocytes, I think.
I think
yeah,
red
blood cells
like osteoblasts and things like
That's
that
it.
build bone material. But what they found were the breakdown compounds of red blood cells. They didn't find any intact red blood cells, and they certainly didn't find any DNA. They tried to get DNA out of it, and it just completely degraded. That's how I suspect he might go on to say this in a minute about DNA, but we can't clone anything from it. And it's lost what I was going to say. No, it certainly proves that it wasn't a recent event that these things were fossilized. Mammoths and so on, which supposedly existed before the flood, we do find their DNA, but we've not found a single shred of dinosaur DNA.
Completely turned into stone. There's still parts of it that are like fresh bones. Now, first of all...
Okay, this is basically what I just said, but no, they were not like fresh bones. They were basically what organic material was left had turned to sludge. It was not bone in the sense that you would recognize it as such. It is another one of those
it didn't have any cells, or it wasn't intact in that way.
No.
First of all, if that's the case, how long ago did that dinosaur die? Millions of years ago? Not that long ago. Some hundreds or maybe a couple thousand years ago, but not millions of years ago. And look at this.
Well, this is basically what I was just saying, but again, because it is not very well preserved, the fact that it's there at all is something of a miracle, but that doesn't mean that it died recently, because, as I say, it has not been preserved to the same extent of mammoths and giant sloths and
haven't we managed to extract fairly complete mammoth DNA?
Yes, we have. I mean, they were preserved in ice, which is a very good preservation medium.
I thought that the ice, though, could actually cause the cellular structure, well, cells in particular, to explode if you froze it.
But as long as you're able to, you don't need the cells intact per se.
So it wasn't a flood of water, it was this horrible treacle-like substance that would have taken eons to travel across the surface of the planet.
Well, if you take sticky things and heat them up, they become quite runny. But no, and then some more no.
We don't have to explain this one, do we?
No.
That is bollocks. Enough said.
It became trapped in there. And then it became petrified or fossilized in that clear crystalline...
There is a difference between petrification and fossilization.
That's very true.
Petrification is what happens when you take something modern and recent and you stick it in water that's rich in dissolved calcium carbonate type stuff, and it will become petrified. And
no, that's concretion. That's something different entirely. But no, petrification just means turning into stone, and that can be by a number of processes. I suppose you could say that the amber petrified and that the mosquito was fossilized, but it's, yeah.
No, but I was going to say fossilization is complete replacement through and through of mineralization.
Yeah.
They are different, even if I may have fluffed it.
Amber. Now that was a movie. It is not the truth. What is the truth is this next
No, that's just the only thing we agree on.
They have found Tyrannosaurus rex bones that are not completely fossilized. They're not
Stop!
No, they have... Well, this is one of those things, I suppose. You could say that what they found was not... No, this is a bit confusing because it is all kinds of technicalities. There was some dinosaur bones found which had non-mineralized tissue in it, or rather non-mineralized material in it. And you could
no, from what I understand, it wasn't that it was unmineralized. It was just mineralized, but there was still the imprint of the soft tissue there. That the soft tissue had been preserved.
Yeah, well, they said that
had
there was basically just gunk inside them. So these, it's rather like what happens if you leave lettuce in the freezer, in the salad compartment of your freezer for 14 years and then come back and open the door. You're not going to find lovely intact cells, you just find sludge. And they found basically the dinosaur bones had fossilized around the outside, and that created a sealed compartment inside, and so there was some unmineralized